It's a gloomy night here at the Chum City building in Toronto, and the Manson family has gathered for a rare and unforgettable visitation with the Reverend Marilyn Manson himself. In a minute, we're going to take you inside and give you a little tour of Marilyn's world, courtesy of the man, his fans, and his critics. But first, after we deal with this nasty little feedback problem, who is Marilyn Manson, and where in hell does he come from? Shock rock. It's all been done before, right?
Baby, can't take things on the sill.
These days, you got to go further and further to scare your parents. Enter Marilyn Manson and his new album, Antichrist Superstar. Marilyn's got a whole keyboard full of bad boy buttons to push. He's part cyborg, part self-mutilator, a minister of the Church of Satan. He and his bandmates named themselves after female pop icons and famous serial killers. All this, and he wears a tutu. And he's selling records faster than you can pierce an eyebrow. 100,000 copies in the last 12 days across Canada.
Sweet dreams are made of these.
Leonard Cohen once wrote that lousy little poets want to sound like Charlie Manson even when they're dancing. So here's the question. Is this just the same old shock rock, but voltage enhanced for the millennium? Is Marilyn no more than a master marketeer, adding fuel to the corporate machine? Or is he really the Antichrist superstar, forcing us to confront our own self-destruction, an intentionally ugly reflection of ourselves, come to shock us out of passivity? Marilyn Manson, too much for much? Or is he us? We are live inside, and we are graced by the unholy presence of the Reverend Marilyn Manson himself. Welcome to Too Much for Much. All right.
Thank you.
Oh, and I think the people outside are happy to see you, by the way. Let's start with a response to the tape that we played at the top of the show. Are you us? You talk about being a reflection of North American culture. What is it that you're reflecting, and what are you trying to do with it?
It's all of that. You know, America's fear of something like Marilyn Manson is what has created it. Antichrist Superstar is, you know, the mythology of Antichrist is not only one person, but it's collective disbelief in Christianity. And I think it's someone like me has a role to awaken that idea of individuality in everybody.
It's pretty clear to see the Manson part of Marilyn Manson, but what some people find a little harder to find is the Marilyn part and the beauty in it. Is that
well? That's typically American, you know, because America's always going to gravitate towards the dark side because that's what they thrive on, you know. Very few times do people ask me about the Marilyn side, but I think obviously the glamour, the the superstardom of it all is very Marilyn Monroe, you know, to me. So
I guess in Canada we don't have the same weaknesses because, well, all these people seem to see the glamour, I think.
well, yeah, there you go. That's your advantage to Americans.
There we go. That may be a theme that crops up more than once tonight. The video, your most recent one, "Beautiful People," how are these themes at work in this piece?
Well, that song talks about the fascism of beauty in America, how there's a real status quo. It's not necessarily what is beautiful or what's ugly, but it's what's popular. And it's just kind of attacking that idea that, you know, I'd rather not try and fit into their category. I'd rather make my own, you know, so. And Floria, the Canadian.
Floria, the Torontonian, who is here tonight. Floria's here somewhere.
She's here somewhere.
We'll find her. We'll bug her later.
She directed the video, and I explained to her what the song was about, and I thought she had a great representation of it.
I think she got it.
Yes.
Yeah. The fascism bit, I personally want to get back to a little later. But first, let's check out the video. In case you haven't seen it, playing very regularly on MuchMusic, "Beautiful People" by Marilyn Manson on Too Much for Much. back live on Too Much for Much with Marilyn Manson, who is in the house. There's lots of people outside who can't get in. We fit as many people as we can inside. Do you love it, beautiful people?
Oh, yeah.
Do you love it?
Very much.
Do you love it?
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
No, don't love it at all.
All right, 3-1. That's decent. There is a way for you to get involved in this conversation, and I sincerely hope that you will join us on Too Much for Much tonight. You can call us, you can fax us, or you can email us. If you want a telephone, the number is 1-800-265-MUCH. If you want to fax us, it's 1-416-591-MUCH. And if you want to do the cyber thing, it's toomuch@muchmusic.com. We'll keep putting those up throughout the show. It's an interactive show. We have way too many people to get to already. And so what I'm going to do is right now, I'm going to take a little break, get your questions prepared, get your passionate speeches ready to deliver, and we're going to hear more from Marilyn and a bunch of people that we've asked to come down and talk with us when we come back.
Which one do you have from the blonde or the two of them?
Listen carefully.
You know those guys that were on before and they were saying that, you know, whatever.
Freaks should go back to
Pennsylvania. Well, I just want to tell them that just, like, get away and, you know, we dress how we ever want to. So I don't think, yeah, and I don't think that we should, like, you know, be told to go back to Pennsylvania. I'm not even from Pennsylvania, so.
Pennsylvania.
Whatever. What the So, I think that those guys should go back wherever they came from because those guys are little rappers and they're idiots, so they can go off.
We're back live on Too Much for Much with Marilyn Manson. I just want to quickly introduce you to some of the people that we've asked to come down and talk with us tonight, and then we can get this free-for-all going. First of all, in the right corner, Greg Quill is a writer for the Toronto Star. He writes about television. He's been a music fan for a long time, and he also has a kid. Kids? Hey, kids. That's Greg. Welcome, Greg. Over here is Lynn Crosby, who's teaching at the University of Toronto. She's also a poet. Lynn has done some serious writing and marinating in the whole realm of serial killer culture. And I'll be bugging her about my choice of words later. That's Lynn Crosby. Next to Lynn is Mark Kingwell, who also teaches at the University of Toronto, but don't worry, there are no quizzes at any time in the show. Mark is also a TV writer for Saturday Night Magazine, and he's written a book about the millennium. So we'll get the millennial angle from Mark. Next to Mark is Tim Hoff, who is a frontline street worker working with street kids, dealing with substance abuse and other issues of the street. Tim is also a rock and roller in his own right, plays in a hard rock band. And word has it that he's a Christian, but don't be afraid. I know that's a very fearful crowd. Next to Tim is Chris O'Connor. You may have been offended and inspired by his writings in the weekly I Magazine. Chris is also a recovering goth, and we'll get to that. Actually, why don't we get to that right now?
Get to it right now?
What's a recovering goth? What's your experience with this?
Okay, what is a recovering goth? Well, first of all, I might point out that I still have the markings to prove it. Okay. Yeah, I was, I mean, there's different substrat of what a goth is. I mean, I was sort of into an older kind. I was really fascinated by stuff like The Birthday Party and Diamante Galas and the Swans. And I think eventually, though, I just got really tired of looking at the world through my own scar tissue. You know, everything just kind of became the same black and blue, and ultimately, that kind of solipsism just became kind of boring after a while.
Is that how you feel about the music of Marilyn Manson?
Not necessarily. I want to save that. I want to get to that later. I've got arguments about that. Don't worry.
Okay. What are you laughing about, Lynn?
Oh, the saving it later gambit, which I'd like to do for the whole show, actually.
Lynn's saving the whole show for later. Marilyn, I know you're busy, but Who is this guy, anyway?
He's just part of my
Part of
entourage.
your entourage, okay, all right. Am I in any physical danger? No.
Not unless you say the wrong thing.
All right, I'll try to say the wrong thing as soon as possible. How do you respond to that angle, that take on your music, that it's seeing the world through your own scar tissue, that there's no hope available in the vision that you...
Well, I don't know if he was directing me, directly, but our new record, Antichrist Superstar, is a sort of autobiography. It looks at my own death. It looks at how things relate to society. And there is a struggle between if there's a hope and if there's no hope. And that's really where Antichrist Superstar is the element of everybody's personality that's nihilistic and, very gothic, and that has no, trust for mankind. And that's a struggle that I go through daily, whether, I think there's a reason to care or if there's no reason to care. So, I mean, that's one side of what I do. I think our new record is very, balanced in that it looks at both sides.
I want to just swing over here to some of the people who have come down in a passionate capacity, talking about a battle between hopefulness and hopelessness. Is that what draws you to the music of Marilyn Manson? Does anyone have anything they want to add on that?
It's basically just rock and roll, but he's asking questions, and most music doesn't ask any questions. It provides answers, but it doesn't stimulate you to think. And you look at the videos, you look at the music, and they're images which are disturbing and are strange and bizarre and beautiful and weird, but they're asking, what is this? And you don't really have a ready answer. And that's one thing that's disturbing for people because they want answers, and he's not providing them.
I wanted to actually, whoops, sorry. Oh, it's a camera. What do you know? I want to throw this down to Greg because asking questions and finding answers is something that you're struggling with in this music as a parent.
Yeah.
What's your take?
It's important to ask questions, and television is a very powerful medium. Videos, of course, are mini movies, which most youngsters take enormous numbers of signals from. But let's not forget that they are basically marketing paraphernalia. In the grand scheme of things, they're just bits of publicity. They're ads, that allow Much Music, for example, to exist without having to pay for programming. It's
political points being made early on the show tonight.
But I've watched the videos, but I don't see anything, and I don't hear anything apart from the fact that it's pretty terrible music. But I don't hear anything that I haven't heard before.
Oh, when a ripple goes through the room, I like it when that happens. Mark, just interesting that Greg talks about the marketing of things, and Marilyn talks a lot about subversion of the mainstream, or even taking over the mainstream.
Manipulation
of the mainstream. I wanted to get just a take from you on how Marilyn's music fits into that, and see if Marilyn, what he makes of that.
Well, I have to say I agree with Greg about the music, because I think the best song that you recorded, somebody else wrote. But quite apart from that, I think...
Oh, you guys wouldn't last 2 minutes outside.
Yeah, I know.
Come on.
But quite apart from that, I think what's interesting about the videos and the lyrics of the songs is the iconography. And I think you mentioned it off the top, the millennial resonance is very strong. You've got clear apocalyptic imagery, the bombed out urban landscape, you've got the marking of the body, and these images that are drawn from the kind of post-nuclear wardrobe of Mad Max and after. So I think this is very interesting. Also, the compression of the icons, Marilyn Manson and the other names of the members of the group, I think this music is distinguished by its cleverness. I think it's cleverer than Alice Cooper, by far, which is an obvious comparison point.
All right. Marilyn, how do you respond to being called clever?
I take it as a compliment, but I mean, there's different ways you can interpret the music. There's two kinds of people in the world: people who like Marilyn Manson, people who are jealous. So.
Oh, and they like that outside. Hard to believe.
There's only two options.
It's funny, though, that you've done a lot of critiquing of the mainstream and manipulating of the mainstream, and now you are a big part of it. I mean, you cannot sell 100,000 records, or at least ship 100,000 records in 12 days in a little country of 20 million people and not become that which you have spent so much time clawing away at. So how are you going to deal with this? You're going to have, you know, people jumping on the bandwagon. You're going to have people who don't get your thing joining the family.
That's the only way you can change things. You know, you can be a small-time person that sits around and complains about things, or you can be a part of it and change what it is. And that's what I've chosen to do. And anybody that thinks that we've sold out or, you know, become something that we didn't set out to be is wrong, because we've always set out to be part of the mainstream, because that's the only way they can change what it is.
It's funny, most artists who try to enter the mainstream go through a lot of struggle, crisis of conscience about how to do that and still maintain the integrity of the work and making sure that the people who are listening to it are actually getting the complicated messages that they're delivering.
I mean, we've always just been what we are. We haven't changed for any reason. Luckily, society has caught up with us, you know.
Has society caught up with Marilyn Manson? Let's take a phone call, but save that question for later. Dave is calling from Vancouver. Dave.
Hi.
Hello, Dave.
I was going to ask Marilyn, is your album just a mockery of Christian American culture, or is it actual prophecy? You've made references to Revelations, and in an interview you said it was an actual prediction of things to come.
Heavy-duty question.
I'd say it's both of those. I mean, it's, like I said before, it's an autobiography of what I see my life as, and I talk about a lot of things that haven't happened yet. And if you want to look at that as a prophecy, you can, but, you know, I'm a big believer in the idea of will to power, and if you want something bad enough, you make it happen. And as far as Christianity goes, I mean, Christians are going to see me as the bad guy and as the Antichrist, and that's a role I've accepted. But I see what I do as a positive thing. I'm trying to bring people closer to themselves, you know, that may be further away from God, but that's closer to themselves, and I think that's a good thing. I think that makes people stronger.
How do you respond to that, Tim? Marilyn feels that what he's doing is a positive thing.
I am a born-again Christian. I work with an organization called Youth for Christ, but I've been working on the streets for the last 9.5 years with street youth. And it seems like you're throwing an anchor to people that are already drowning in a lot of ways. My understanding of rock music and being involved myself is that you have the opportunity to be the voice of a generation and a voice to a generation. I think to some segment of the population, you're doing an important job at being a voice of a generation. There's a lot of hurting kids that I know that can relate to that into what you do. A voice to a generation, I think you're doing a pathetic job. The lack of hope, the greatest needs in the street are hope, trust, and dignity. And I've studied your stuff pretty closely, and there are no signs of it. You said, just to say, you talked about being afraid. I think darkness is afraid of light, so I wonder how he responds to that.
One of my big points is to say that, you know, if the things that you mentioned, hope and these things, you know, Christianity breeds a lot of weakness in that you're putting faith in something that you can't put your hands on, but I'm trying to tell people to believe in themselves because that's all that they have to believe in. And I think that that's a positive thing.
Right, just before we get any heavier into this, I believe that we have to take a break, just a quick one. But we'll be back. And when we come back, I want to talk about cutting yourself up, because that's something that I think a lot of people have responded to. We'll be back on Too Much for Much. We're back live on Too Much for Much, and I want to read a fax that just rolled in while we were just doing that last pack. Dear Mr. Manson, this is from Julie and Brittany in Richmond Hill, Ontario. You seem quite intelligent when being interviewed. Does it occur to you that by promoting self-mutilation, you're giving the message to millions of fans that harming themselves is a cool thing to do? And just before you respond to that, I want to play a quick piece of tape. We were at your in-store appearance at a record store downtown, and we took the opportunity to ask some of your fans about specific issues that come up, and self-mutilation was one of them. So this is fan responses to the question of self-mutilation. Let's roll that.
It doesn't really do anything for me, but whatever people like, they can do. I think it's just people looking for something different.
Self-mutilation, I view people should, if they're into that, they should not do it because Mr. Manson does it or Marilyn Manson does it. I think it's something that if you're into it, do it.
I personally do not find anything appealing about self-mutilation. I mean, I think that people who have piercings look cool and everything, but just to me personally, it does not appeal to me. I don't like to hurt myself, so.
Self-mutilation? I think it's unoffensive.
It's cool. They're the band, not me. They can do whatever they want. They're the band, not me. It's cool.
They're the band, not me. Well, you have the explicit permission of a very young kid to do whatever you want, so I'm sure you're thrilled about that.
Well, that's, you know, it's almost an outdated subject for me. It was something that I was very much into a year ago, but not so much into anymore. But for me, it was an expression of, you know, maybe me trying to relate to the audience what lyrically I was trying to express pain-wise, physically. And it was kind of ritualistic, but it's not something that I do now, but that's not to say that I regret it or am against it. It was just where I was at a year ago.
So it's about externalizing your pain? It's about taking it back?
Yeah, and I mean, it's actually a very Christian ritual. If you look back in history, it was something, flailing and self-mutilation was something that people used to do to repent for their sins. So
they didn't really have rock stars, though.
They have to actually blame the Christians for that.
They didn't have rock stars then that they idolized in that same way.
No, but they had a guy on a cross who was very similar.
Kind of rock starish.
I'd like to respond to the idea put forth that people who do take an interest in things like self-mutilation or the different practices that Marilyn Manson exposes people to through his videos are somehow drowning, or, you know, you're throwing them an anchor. I mean, to me, people who do express themselves in this way are a lot less likely to drown than people who are sitting back, repressed, who don't talk about it. And I think that we live in a big city, and it's easy to forget that people in small towns who maybe dress like this or explore these type of things are actually taking a pretty big risk in their own communities. And I don't think they should be called, like, drowning people. I think they're probably going to be a lot more healthy.
Tim, you want a chance to respond to that?
Sure. I spent a couple hours down here before I came down and talking to some people out in the crowd, but some of the kids I work with over on Yonge Street and stuff, we got 12 and 13-year-olds on the street who take you almost as their role model because their parents have messed them over. And I know you understand it because that's part of your message. But I think that a lot of what happens with your fans and you're going platinum with your music and stuff like this, they don't understand the satanic message. They think it's gimmicky, but I can tell from reading through it and from Little Horn, The Man You Fear, the satanic references that come through that speak strong. It's not a gimmick, is it? That's really who you are.
Well, I mean, Satanism is only one element of what I'm about. I like philosophy, and Satanism is an interesting philosophy because it's about self-preservation and individuality. The word Satan, you know, is a rebellion against society, but...
In your life, is there an opportunity for salvation? Like, I cling to my salvation pretty intensely. Do you understand salvation?
I mean, that's what my whole record is about, what I struggled through, and I think the answer in the end is your only salvation is yourself, and that was my answer at the end. You know?
Your only salvation is yourself. I got to get back here because there's people who are desperate to speak. I'll plow right into the crowd here. Go ahead.
Okay, my question is this. Since you've not only capitalized, but also discovered on society's fears, what are your fears? And perhaps are they being right here, right now? Is this a fear to you, being discovered, people understanding you, or is this what you want? Like, what are your fears?
With fear, I've always, when I've been afraid of something, I do it, so I'm not afraid of it anymore. And I think now the only fear I have is of failure, so I try my best to succeed at what I do and do the best at what I do.
So I thought you were trying to do your fears, so if your fear is failure, you want to fail then?
Well, no, I attack my fears, so if I'm afraid of something, I'm not
attacking failure. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, it's been established that self-mutilation is an externalization of pain, and that was a fad for you. Now, I too am a recovering goth. I'm not a goth anymore, just like the gentleman over here. And I understand the self-mutilation thing as being a fad, just as me being a goth was also an externalization of my pain. that was just a fad. I still have pain inside, but I take it out on other people in different ways. Instead of shocking them. You know, I'll infiltrate them mentally. I won't shock them with my appearance, and I won't shock them by ripping myself apart.
Well, the important thing is that you're expressing your emotions, and that's what I was doing at the time, and that's what you're doing now, and everybody has to find a different way, a different outlet to express what's in them. You know, and some people have music, some people have different ways, you know? So you find a different way, and that's great.
You've got a response to this.
I guess when you're showing young people who, you're showing them that this is the only way, though, and I'm wondering, you said it's important to externalize and to talk about what's going on in your body, and I agree with that, but what other messages are you giving people about other outlets, other than cutting yourself?
Well, I've never told anybody that that was what was, you know, and I've never made a video of cutting myself or anything of that nature, but my point has always been to express yourself, the bottom line, you know, to ask questions, to be creative, to think, to do something more and above just rock and roll.
I'm going to grab another response over here. Go ahead.
Well, I just think that if you're talking about, well, why isn't he presenting all these other outlets for expression, why should he? He's his own artist. He's his own person. His responsibility is to himself. There's plenty of other artists out there who are expressing other views. You know, he's the one who's showing us something different or something aside from what we see most of the time on MuchMusic. So why should he show us other outlets?
All right. Well, actually, I had a feeling that might generate a little response. And I just want to shift things. I just want to shift things to a slightly different angle here, because my response, my personal response, the only thing that troubles me is references to fascism and fascist imagery in your video, which some people may catch depending on their level of sensitivity. And some of the things you say about society not having any obligation to take care of the weak. And you have a lot of impatience around people who are weak, however you define that.
Well,
and at the same time, you take no responsibility for how people react to your music. But you're messing with really potent ideas that have killed a lot of people in this century or this decade,
well,
this year.
The thing is, and not to speak for Canada, but America is very fascist. But it disguises that in the idea of MTV and the idea of commerciality. And they're very much telling you what you want and what you don't want. And the idea of individuality is a farce. So I've made a point to show to people, almost cynically, the relationship between music and fascism, how it's almost totalitarian. But I've never at any point promoted fascism. I'm making a statement at it.
It's funny because you have so many layers of distance from your thing. I mean, you attribute it to a character, or you say this is about everyone, not just me, or everyone has to take their own message from it. It's like you're really ducking any personal responsibility for how people react to your music.
But I'm very personally involved in all of it, so I'm not ducking any of it. I'm very much a part of it.
But with the way people that respond to your music is, I mean, if you're Hootie and the Blowfish, for instance, who have not come up tonight, and I don't know why that is so far. You know, they don't take responsibility for, but they're sort of mainstream rock stars. But you are someone who calls himself a reverend and preaches to people, and yet you still don't want to take responsibility when people get the wrong take on your message.
Well, that's just as ridiculous as saying, should I blame Hootie and the Blowfish for making my life completely boring?
Now, when you're the host in a situation like that, you take a phone call. Russ is on the line from Calgary.
Water.
Russ, talk to me.
Hey.
Hi, Russ.
How's it going?
What's up?
I just want to tell Marilyn Manson that he really rocks, and that I'm glad that he's teaching us young adolescents to go for individualism, not to follow what others think.
Thank you.
I'm right into Marilyn Manson because I can relate to a lot of his music. He deals with a lot of social issues that I've been involved in. There's a song on Lunchbox, I want to grow up, I want to be the biggest rock and roll star so no one beeps with me. Well, when I was going to school and like that, I wasn't with the jocks and stuff. I was the metalhead by myself. Anyway, I had dreams of being a rock star and getting into the bands and stuff like that, you know, and all the jocks would stand back, you know, that fucking wimp, whatever. You know, and the song that he sings on, know, Lunchbox. I could really relate to him. Like, oh, this guy's cool, man. So I checked into it more, and I'm like, what's with all the controversy around this Marilyn Manson stuff, about the self-mutilation, self-expression, and stuff like that. I went through that last year too. You know, my body's my temple, and I went to get into a fight last year. So I said, well, you're not gonna hurt me, and I hurt myself. And it freaked him out, and it sent him off. He's like, you're nuts, you know, and I almost hurt myself in the process, but at the same time, I dealt with my inner side, you know, and expressed myself, leave me the frig alone, you know, and stuff like that. And, you know, hearing that he's into mutilation, stuff like that, it, you know, definitely shows a lot of expression and stuff, and it does get the release out.
I got to get that phone call. Hang on. Right. Sorry. No, go ahead.
I'm nervous. Well, I see society as being a really complicated and many times a very ugly thing, and you've got people that like to run away from their fears by, you know, running up the corporate ladder and joining the establishment, and then you've got other people that, you know, maybe dress like myself who are trying to sort of encounter their demons and become better people that way. And in music, you know, it's a similar situation where you've got a lot of bands coming out in T-shirts and smiling, playing jangly music, and that's great, but they're, you know, maybe avoiding their fears, whereas here you've got somebody who's facing up to the dark things that are definitely reality and not being afraid to reflect that.
Yeah. Can I just respond to that?
You know what, you can, but as soon as we come back from commercial, because unfortunately we got to pay the bills. But we'll be right back on Too Much for Much. This is starting to get hot.
I got him good with the hoodie and the blowfish, didn't I? Oh, that was beautiful.
Listen carefully.
Hi, my name's Justin. I'm 18 years old. I am a fan of Marilyn Manson, but it seems to me that ever since a couple months ago, they came out with Sweet Dreams, and everybody loves them, including little boys and girls. Little kids. I don't have a big problem with that. My concern is that Marilyn Manson isn't the kind of person that kids would want to grow up with that kind of a role model. So if you're a parent and your kid is listening to Marilyn Manson, maybe you should have a talk with him or her. He's pro-drugs, no safe sex. It's just a bad idea, and it kind of worries me. I'm 18 years old. I know what I'm listening to. I don't agree with it. I respect them as musicians, but I don't respect them as people.
We hitchhiked from Aurelia just to see Marilyn Manson. Yeah, and we're gonna meet him today.
We're back live on Too Much for Much with Marilyn Manson, and the Marilyn part of the love-in continues, but I do want to get to the Manson side of things as well. Serial killer culture is part of the culture of this band, and at the in-store record signing today, we talked to some of Marilyn's fans about what's cool about serial killers and what their take is on serial killer culture. Let's run that tape.
It's exciting. It excites people. And they're very sexy, so I think they're very appealing to moi and other freaky people like myself.
There's a certain fascination, though, because nobody really knows what made them snap.
Personally, I feel that serial killers are interesting. I'm very interested in them, but there's nothing, I'm not fascinated by them. I'm fascinated by the way they think, like what happened to them when they were younger to make them do what they did.
Because they're sexy.
So, serial killers are sexy. Lynn, I know you've done some thinking and some writing about this, and I don't think that you think that Marilyn's doing this, but what's your response to what you've just seen and to Marilyn's take on it?
Well, I'd first like to introduce myself as the token female and token fan on the panel. I really like your music very much, and I used to think that you had a kind of a fanish relationship with serial killers, and I've since reevaluated that. I mean, I agree with Elliot Layton that the only killer's only value is as objects of study, and I think that you're doing that. I think that you're being critical in your relationship to killers, not only in your name, but in your work. And that image of you riding the hog in Sweet Dreams seems like a wonderful repossession of Manson's blood pig. I mean, I could be way off, but that's the way I read the kind of, not just the wit of your work, but also your sense of interrogating the role of the serial killer in society.
But not all the kids are getting that.
What do you mean by, well, I noticed.
Well, it's sexy and it's cool.
Yeah, John Wayne Gacy is really sexy.
I didn't say it was the kids
No,
on
I
Main Street
know,
today.
but
You said it.
yeah, I know.
So what's?
Why do they think killers are sexy?
Not why do they think, but I mean, okay, you're getting it on one level, and they're getting it on another level. So as a newborn fan of Marilyn Manson, you feel comfortable with the way that everyone else responds to his music, or do you divorce yourself from
I'm not even
responsibility for that as
connecting
well?
what I just saw on television with his music. I mean, I honestly believe he's doing something intelligent with the subject of murder. What I just heard wasn't particularly intelligent. However, I do understand that some women and men find a sexual connection with murderers because they have a kind of power socially.
Well, the funny thing is, we live in a country that makes Jesse James a hero. You know, and he was just as much a serial killer as Ted Bundy.
Right.
So, you know, you want to blame something, you blame that squared machine right there, because that's what makes serial killers sexy.
But the 13-year-olds don't understand what she just profiled. Those kids that think it's sexy and cool, they don't have that comprehension. It's ridiculous.
Why
And
do you
who
make
was
these
down at
assumptions about what
HMV
13-year-olds
this
understand?
afternoon? I mean, what size of the population was it? 50%, 60% that would have been under 16 years old?
I can appreciate that, but you can't blame me for how parents raise their kids. And you can't blame me for the phenomenon of violence being glorified. I mean, it was there way before I've ever existed.
But I can blame you as a thinking adult.
I'm just making a comment on it, you know. I mean, you could want me to be a hero and take all these people to church, but, you know, I'm just making a statement because I'm an artist, you know. And I can appreciate where you're coming from because a lot of my morals aren't far from yours. It's just I do things a different way. I do things in a much more honest, raw way. And that's why it rubs people wrong sometimes, you know, but we're not that far off.
I would think
Folks,
we're pretty
just
far.
one second. He thinks you're pretty far apart. I just want to let everyone know we got 10 minutes, all right? So it's either soundbite time or a lot of people aren't going to get to say what they want to say. Chris.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because we've kind of kept hitting on this idea of what Marilyn is doing as a reflection or a mirror of society. Okay, that he's mirroring either society's fascination with serial killers or fascination with self-mutilation, depression. Okay, and maybe he is a good mirror of society, and maybe, you know, maybe he does a good job of that. But I think what he doesn't do is I don't think he does it with a sense of compassion. Okay, because I've read interviews where you've kind of given me the impression that you basically, you know, don't give a damn whether your fans live or die. Because I think I remember you saying in a couple of interviews that if someone had killed himself because of something that he felt inspired you, I'm not saying it's your fault. I mean, it's obviously his, but there's some sort of influence going on that it wouldn't really bother you that much. And okay, right, I'll cut to the chase. What I'm saying though is that it's one thing to say you're a reflection of a society, but what I really want to know is if you're just getting people to reflect and think about their own pain and confront it, okay? I mean, that's valid, but what I'm saying, what do you do afterwards? What do you give them to replace it with? I mean, it seems with you that pain and understanding of it is just an end in itself, rather than a means to self-realization.
Well, we talk a lot about hate, but the idea of love is important too, and in America, North America for that matter, love is, you know, the concept of love thy neighbor, I think is ridiculous because, you know, the things that I love, I would die for. But if you love everything, it has absolutely no value.
I wouldn't agree with that, because it reminds me of something I read in an article about Lou Reed when they were talking about the difference between a pessimist and a nihilist. They're saying that a nihilist essentially believes that things like universal laws and everything is a bad joke and it's just not worth realizing. But a pessimist, which I consider myself, and I think, you know, could be something to strive towards, is someone who thinks that love and acceptance is incredibly hard and maybe hardly ever happens at all. But the very fact that it's possible means that it's worth going for. I mean, I
agree. I'm saying I love things and I would die for them, but if you pass out love openly, then it has no value. So this idea of compassion that you have, you know, I care for people who are intelligent. That's why I say, don't be an idiot. If you're smart enough to realize, don't kill yourself over a rock album, then I love you.
Yeah,
if you're an idiot, kill yourself.
But why should
be
you love?
happy.
Okay, but why should you love people only who you think are fit
Hang on,
for
Chris,
it?
we got another corner in here. Greg, you're dying to say something.
Well, actually, I take issue with this whole idea. I mean, art is art. It's out there. You know, you either put bums on seats or you don't. And you know, I deplore the idea of this turning into some kind of censorship session. You know, people like it, people don't. But let's not forget that what Mrs. Marilyn is selling.
Mrs. Marilyn, I think you'll answer to that. Yeah, go ahead.
Is doing is selling records. I mean, this is not art. It is you know.
Artists sell their art. That's
Actually, Mark, you have an interesting take on this too, because this millennial angst, it sells pretty well, doesn't it?
Well, it sells more and more as time goes on too. And I think what's interesting about a lot of the stuff that we've been seeing is this move to ever greater degrees of extremism. And one of the things that's troubling about that is that it's not clear where you're going to go. I think Chris is asking the right question, because you can keep pushing this. So, you know, you pierce your body, you tattoo your body. What do you do next? Cut off a finger, cut off an arm? You know, I don't know. But at a certain point, this becomes self-defeating. And I think before it gets to that point, you've got to say, let's turn it around and let's do something really interesting
I
and
mean,
good.
I would love to see America be conservative again, and North America again, I'm sorry.
Whoa, this province is pretty conservative right now. I don't know if you're not reading the papers
I feel
here.
it's almost my duty to take things to such an extreme level so it can be born again and appreciate the beauty and the magic of taboo of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, because it's so commonplace. You know, even this show is called Too Much, but it's not. It's not too much for anybody. It's every day, you know. I would love to be in the 50s and the 60s again when, you know, people blushed when you
it'd be a lot easier for you to shock people.
You know?
Absolutely.
I wouldn't have to shock people. I wouldn't be necessary.
I just got to get back here before this poor person has a hernia. Go ahead.
First, I'd like to wish you a happy Halloween. Second, I love the jacket. It's really cool. And third, when was the first time you put on a dress, and how did you feel?
Probably when I was a child, and I felt like I was worried my mom was going to catch me. That was about it.
Just before we got into the dress, we were on something which I think is, as we draw to the close of the show, a good note to end on. And that question, what to do next when everything is so extreme, and when you're about pushing the envelope, and where do you actually go, is a really important one to ask Marilyn.
Well, I guess I'm going to have to become a born-again Christian. That's the only thing that's left to shock people with.
Tim, he's coming across the floor.
It sounds
Go
like
ahead.
a good idea.
So you might as well thank me.
If you'd like to talk to me, I'd be glad to.
Well, I think it's important to keep this in historical context, too, that what Marilyn is doing is not necessarily anything new. Iggy Pop went through the body scarification 25 years ago. Alice Cooper had numerous dates on his 1973 Billion Dollar Babies tour canceled. I think the shock value has stayed pretty much the same. It's just that it looks more intense now because video technology is much, much better. Floria, you're a genius. You make things...
Can we get a shot of Floria in here who directed the video?
I also think it's important to note that, you know, what's happening is a desensitization to sex and violence and rock and roll. Is that, you know...
Absolutely.
You know, it's like, he's not really doing much more than Alice did. I think you would admit that yourself, that Alice Cooper, man, he was on the front lines.
Well,
in
nobody
a pair
knew...
of tall thigh-high leopard boots and a jock strap, you know, cutting up dead babies and making the crowd grab dollar bills off of a sword, you know, showing them how pathetic the whole thing was. What a scam.
Nobody ever knew how ugly war was until the 60s when you saw Vietnam on television, you know. It's TV.
And this ties,
you know,
this ties in with what
and
he's
that's the
talking
medium
about.
that we're on, so, you know, if anyone's to blame, you must blame yourself.
All right, I'll take all the responsibility for the extreme elements of our culture. Go ahead.
I'd like to say that, you know, I hate to see that we're blaming one person for creating monsters in society when it looks like we're just creating our own. Each person is responsible for creating their own monsters and their own fears. I mean, it's like we look at Mr. Manson, Reverend Manson, Marilyn Manson, you know, whatever you want to call him. To us, he's a form of entertainment. If you want to make him out to be a monster or an icon, that's up to you. And it's pretty sad if you blame him for everybody's troubles, or people like him, or people like us that are sitting in here. It's a pretty sad state of affairs when we have to turn to one person and say, it's all your fault.
I'm just going to come over here. Since it's all entertainment at this point, this person is trying to entertain us all night. Go ahead.
Okay, what I want to know is what he thinks makes a person beautiful, and who does he consider to be beautiful people?
Marilyn, now that we're thoroughly in the realm of entertainment, what's beautiful and what makes a beautiful person from this beautiful person over here?
I mean, I've always enjoyed things that people have looked at as ugly, I think anything that's imperfect or flawed is more beautiful than something that's very plastic and, you know, fits the status quo of what's beautiful.
Okay, 30 seconds. What to do with it? So many things to say. All right, wrap it up.
I'd like to say that, to start off the show earlier, your comment about that his music sucks. I don't necessarily like his music either, but I would never say it sucked. That's a subjective attitude, and subjective attitudes suck.
He said he didn't like it, but it was selling a lot of records. Guys, we're just about out of time, so I have to say thank you very much. Thanks to Marilyn for coming down, making an unforgettable Too Much for Much, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. That was fun. It's all right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, real quick.
Some ideas.
Yeah, they're gonna make me do it outside, so okay.
How you doing? You're on the other way.